Hey everybody, I'm Oakley at Oakley Does Everything, and today we're going to be building and reviewing 3x3 Customs router jig. Stay tuned. So today we are going to be building and reviewing Tamar's router jig from 3x3 Custom. I will make sure to have a link in the YouTube description below to their YouTube channel as well as their website. And then that way you know where you can go to find all of the supplies that she uses for her router jig. So the first thing you're going to need to do is go to her website and buy the router jig template. This is about $10 and worth it. This comes with a blueprint template that you need to tape together, as well as step-by-step instructions on how to make this. Now this particular jig is for a trim router, and I'm going to be putting it on my full-size router just because that's what I have. So I am going to need to make some adjustments so that this fits appropriately for my router. The other thing you're going to need to get is a sheet of plexiglass. If you go to her YouTube channel, there's a link in the description on her Amazon store where you can get this, so make sure to go over there, give her your support, and get this sheet of plexiglass. This is about 12 inch by 24 inch. Just a little bit shy of 12 inches. I believe she said, I believe it's like 11 7/8, and she talks about that in her video, so just keep that in mind. For how I'm going to be using it with my router, that's not going to be an issue, and I'll show you that in a minute. The next thing you're going to need is a set of 5-star knobs. Again, Tamar has a link of where you can find these in her YouTube video, so again, check that out. Go to there, make sure you're giving her support through her Amazon store. And the next thing you're going to need is some kind of wooden dowel for the handles. Now for me, I do have a wooden dowel and I was planning on using this, but my full-size router actually has handles, and about where the wood dowel handles go is where my handles end up anyways. So I'm actually going to exclude the wood dowel handles from my router jig and just stick with the ones that are on my router. And of course you are going to need a router. This template is set up for a flush trim router. I'm going to be using my full-size router, and if you're going to be using your full-size router as well, you'll need to make some adjustments to the template in order for it to fit. You also need your router to work on this project. Now the way she has it set up is to use it to cut out and trim some holes and slots for the template. So make sure you actually have a router, otherwise you wouldn't be making this, so why am I saying it anyways? So make sure you have this, and I think you need a 1/2 inch bit as well as a 1/4 inch router bit. So make sure you have those on hand. So the first thing you're going to need to do is put your template together. Now Tamar in her videos almost always says that she recommends putting it by taping it onto a window. You can see it through it quite easily. What I always do is I just take my straight edge ruler and a razor blade or a pair of scissors and just trim it up to the edge that I need it. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and glue this onto our sheet of plexiglass, and I'll show you what Tamar recommends and how I'm going to do it differently for my full-size router. So if you are using a trim router, you just need to tape your template together as one piece and then glue it onto your plexiglass. Just like you see here, this is how Tamar does it. She sets it up like this, and then she uses her table saw to go ahead and trim out all the gray pieces. Now for me, my full-size router would take up a lot of space, and my router overlaps the slots that you need to route out for this jig. And this would work fine for most cases, and you would just utilize a little bit less space than you normally would, but I actually want to extend it out to try to get as much area as I can and only overlap the outside edges just a little bit, about a 1/4 inch on either side. So let me show you how I'm going to set up mine so that I can utilize more space for my full-size router. So if you're like me and you have a larger router, what you can do is you can actually extend this either by going out to the far edges and just lining up your edge pieces and your corners so that you can utilize as much of this as possible. And if that isn't enough, you can then extend it even further to do something like this, where you have a gap in here, and you just want to make sure that you're using your router to line this up, make sure that it's appropriate for your application. And something like this is what I think I'll be doing for my setup. The trim routers that are a lot smaller, they're going to be able to fit within this area and be able to utilize these slots a lot better, and I want to be able to do that as well. So I got a little thinking to do, but the next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and glue this down, and for this piece you don't have to do anything different to this. Alright, so step 2 is we need to take an awl and we need to go ahead and just give us a nice little center punch in all the crosshairs. There's 6 of them on the template, but 2 of those I am not going to use because those are for the handles that she put in there. For those of you that are using a trim router that are much smaller, so again, I'm not going to use those because my full-size router has handles that end up being in about the same location anyway, so I'm just going to omit that. So the next step, which is optional, is to go ahead and score these cross lines here in the D and E section. And again, that's optional. I'm going to do it. And what we're going to do is we're going to use a V-bit. See that? To score those lines, I'm going to clamp down a straight edge, something like this, and then run it along that line. And I'm just going to use my Dremel rather than my router because it'll be a little bit easier to manage for these simpler things. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. Alright, so the next thing we need to do is the center parts of the D, E, and F part. We need to make 1/8 inch through holes on these center pieces. So again, we're just going to drill all the way through those 3 pieces. Now, she also says to go ahead and do some pilot holes in these pieces for the handles, but again, I'm not doing that, so I'm going to not do that in this spot. Now we're going to switch out from our 1/8 inch bit to our 1/4 inch bit. There we go. Now we're going to be drilling out these crosshair center pieces for the G section. This is the G section, the pentagon. I don't know if it's a pentagon. It has 5 sides anyways. Looks like a home plate base. So we're going to drill out the centers for those, not the router area. Like that. Alright, so now is going to be our first opportunity to be using our router. So I'm going to be using my full-size router. And we are going to be needing a 1/4 inch round bit or straight bit. And this is where we're going to route out the 1/4 inch hole slots. And again, we're going to be doing this by using a straight edge to keep our router in place. I am going to have a sheet of MDF underneath of my plexiglass. That way I don't accidentally route through my bench table. So make sure you have something underneath of it so you don't ruin whatever you're working on. So step 4 is to route out all these 1/4 inch through slots on all the pieces. And step 5 is to do the 1/2 inch ones. So it took me forever to get my straight edge set up. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to switch bits and do the 1/4 inch and then go ahead and do the 1/2 inch. And then that way I don't have to recenter this every time. So I'm just going to do that for each set. So I did this set, now I'm going to do the 1/2 inch. Now I'm going to go to this inch, do the 1/4 inch, and then the 1/2 inch, so on and so forth. Okay, so we have our 1/4 inch and our 1/2 inch. Yes?
What's for dinner?
Figure it out! Alright, so I routed out my 1/4 inch and my 1/2 inch slots for where all of our hardware is going to go. And now it is time to go ahead and cut these pieces out. You're going to be cutting on the gray marks, and I'm going to be using a combination of my table saw as well as my miter saw to make these cuts. So let's head over there and do that. So we are approaching the end of our project and moving on to one of the most important part is making sure that we put our plate in the proper spot on our main body of the jig, part A, so that way we get it nice and centered and have a good proper attachment from our jig to our router. So the first thing you're going to need to do is take the plate off of your router. I don't have a plate that goes on the opposite side, so I'm just going to take my carriage, I don't know what to call this, but the part where the handles are on mine, and just kind of put it on there, get the bulky part out of the way, and then mark the spots so I know where to drill my holes. So the way I'm going to do this is I have my V-bit groove in there. I'm going to set it down onto my center point right there. I'm just going to take my pencil and mark the circumference, and now I'm going to actually take my router out, put it back on there. Now I'm going to take my pencil and I'm going to mark where my mounting bolts go. So I got a couple. Now that we have our marks for our attachment points, we're going to go ahead and take this over to the drill press and drill them out. So the first thing we're going to do is drill a pilot hole using a 1/8 inch drill bit. Now we're going to switch out our drill bit for a 1/2 inch Forstner bit. And these are going to be countersunk holes, so we're not going to go all the way through here. Alright, and now the last thing is to switch out our 1/2 inch Forstner bit with a 1/4 inch drill bit, and we're going to go through the 1/8 inch holes that we've already drilled. And there we have our attachment bolt holes right there. And the final hole we need to drill is our center where the router bit actually goes out through. So I'm going to use a 1.25 inch Forstner bit and drill all the way through, making sure that I have a piece of MDF underneath of this. That way I don't mess up my table and we don't have blowout on the back of the plexiglass. I actually don't have an 1.25 inch Forstner bit, but this is an 1 3/8, so I'm going to be using that instead. So the next step would be to attach the handles to the handle part, but again, I'm not doing that. Mine fit basically at the same places, so I'm just going to continue to use the handle on my router. And then the final part would be to put the pin in the D or the E section. I'm going to save that for a later time, but that is what you would need to use the circle jig. But now we have basically all the steps done. We're going to go ahead and peel the covering tape off of all of our pieces and go ahead and put the router together. I guess it looks the same on either side, doesn't it? Alright, so review time on the 3x3 Customs router jig. Overall, I think it was pretty good. If you follow the instructions that come along with the template, it's not too hard to follow along with. I do like how easy it is to hold and how much stability it does add to the router when you're actually freehanding and going around a piece on it. Now, by no means have I used the entire capabilities of this jig. There are plenty of things that I haven't tried, but the things that I have tried, I am impressed and I am pleased with it. There are a lot of other applications that you can use with this router jig, such as the joints, the mortise and tenons, stuff like that I haven't yet done. But again, for what I have used it so far with, I am pretty pleased. And again, the assembly was pretty straightforward. Now, the things that I would like to see improvement or change on in the future is a way to be able to get more accurate corners with the router. For example, I am routing out some boxes and I have a lot of corners that I have to approach. And although having the jig does make it easier to freehand those, I would like to be able to have a stop so that when I come to a corner, the attachments to the jig will help stop it at that moment. The other thing that I did find a little bit difficult with it isn't any criticism to the jig itself, but more of using plexiglass, is that when you're looking down into your hole where your bit goes in, the plexiglass does make the surface of the wood that you're traveling on look like it's at the top of the plexiglass itself, which can make it hard to realize how close you are to your marks if you're using reference points. And I think one way I might be able to overcome that is actually make the hole for my router bit larger. So I may try and do that just to make it a little easier to see the lines that I'm working with. And again, that's no criticism to the jig itself, just something to keep in mind when you're using plexiglass as your jig. And obviously the convenience of being able to see through it helped a lot, but that was just something that I struggled with a little bit. So that's going to be it for my input. If you have built this jig and you have some things to say about it, please make sure to let us know in the comment section. Make sure to go over to 3x3 Customs YouTube page and check out all of her content. It is amazing and very highly detailed on how to do all of her builds. And of course, if you are going to make this, make sure to go buy it from her, because she seemed to put in a lot of attention to the small details on how to make this, and of course she's going to have the best instructions on how to do it. Again, this video is just a review on what I think of the jig itself. But I do recommend it. I think it's really nice and very helpful, and it does address a lot of things that you would use a router for. But other than that, that's going to be it for me. I want to thank you all so much for watching. If you haven't done so yet, please hit that subscribe button. It's right there in the middle of your screen. And if you want to see other content similar to this, I do have other playlists ready to go for you to watch, so make sure you click on those. But other than that, I'll see everybody in the next video. Have a great day. Bye.